Okay, all right. Okay, let's get started. I am Sudhir Kumar. I've worked with Dr. Nei for, I feel like, all my life. So I have the honor, along with Takashi Gojobori, to open this event celebrating Dr. Nei, his life and legacy. And I'm really grateful, we are really grateful that you're all here to celebrate his life and legacy and his achievements. What you see on the screen is a baseball player card style card that Penn State made for the best faculty in 2008. So you can see how happy Dr. Nei is to be called a baseball player or a football player. So this is the happiest I've ever seen him. That's how it goes. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all to this event. As you know, Dr. Nei passed away on May 18th, early morning, at the age of 92. Professor Lee, Wenchen Lee, and I visited him a few months prior in December, and he was very energetic. He was preparing a picture book of his family, and he made us look through 260 pages of it. And so that, you know, is Dr. Nei. You knew he was there, and in the end, he was very peaceful that he departed from this world, and we are very grateful for everything that he's done. And as you know, the reason we have this very special event, which is rare for SMBE, is because people like him and Walter Fitch in the past, they were the founders of SMBE and MBE. So we are here because they had the foresight to build a community, and so we are really thankful. So what we will do today is we will hear about Dr. Nei through his students and postdocs who pursued their PhD program with him or postdoctoral fellowship with him for multiple years. And these, what you will get is a whole bunch of different perspectives. The presentations are very short. The maximum is 9 minutes, and the minimum is 4 minutes. And essentially, what you will get is an eclectic mix of what people want to talk about. Some people are more scientifically oriented discussion, some are more pictures, but it's going to be painting a picture of Dr. Nei's style, his abilities, his humanity, and the way he did research. We want to thank actually all of us from the Nei's academic family, the organizers, Giorgio, the SMBE Society President Katerina and others on the council, as well as Pepe, with really getting this done in such a short notice. You know, Dr. Nei just passed away 2 months ago, and we just came to our senses that we have to do this a month ago. And so this was really incredible feat on their part to allow us to do and provide such a tremendous venue for this. And the interesting thing is that some of you heard the music in the background. His family, we want to thank for providing the score. In fact, Dr. Nei used to listen to the same score and enjoyed it from his grandsons, Jeremy and Ethan, and his daughter, Marumi. So we are really thankful for them, thankful to them for providing this beautiful score. And in addition to that, the pictures that you saw, family pictures, his son provided, and they were very helpful. And I want to thank all my, academic family members here for being so kind as to keep their presentations to 4 minutes. You know how difficult that is for us all. And to do it so quickly and agree to come. Some of them have actually come primarily for this event. So this is just a wonderful time for us to be together. And so we will start with Takashi Gojobori, who is going to provide his perspective. Takashi.
Welcome to this wonderful event to salute the late Dr. Masatoshi Nei. I'm Takashi Gojobori. I have been with Dr. Nei from December in 1979 to August 1983. But after that, Dr. Nei kindly invited me to mostly Houston as a visiting assistant professor. I still remember when I arrived at the Houston, at the University of Texas at Houston, and I visited the CDPG, Center for Demographic Population Genetics. Then Dr. Nei was not there. Then I think it was Wenshan who welcomed me. Then he took me to the lunch. It was my first encounter in Nei's group. And then at that time, actually, Fumio Tajima was a student 1 year before myself. Then later on, I think Naruya Saito joined, and Dan Grower, others. But Aravinda Chakraborty has been already graduated from graduate school. So therefore, a little bit those early time, of course, before that, Wenshan knows more like his Brown University time. But the other time, he has been, someone said that the Melo, before that, so much he has been keen to compete with other scientists, but he was so kind, and he is just started molecular evolution from population genetics. Of course, he kept population genetics to be so much important. He always thinks that the population genetics is a basis of molecular evolution. Now it goes to genomic evolution. And this is a very early time, and his wife kindly invited me to fishing, but actually no fish was caught, almost always. Just we went, and we really enjoyed. And someone asked me, who took these pictures? Because my families and Dr. Nei and his wife. So I think his son, Keitaro Nei, I think he took a picture of this one. This is Galveston in Houston. In Texas, 1980. And it was a great opportunity for me to write a paper with Wenshan Nei, Dr. Nei, in 1981. It was Nature as a Paradigm of Neutral Evolution. It's quite initial stage of working on nucleotide sequence comparison. Then later on, I worked with synonymous and non-synonymous substitution saturation issues. And then I intensively worked, but my writing of a paper was so bad, I believe. So he finally gave up. Takashi, you submit by your own name. So, that's a good opportunity or bad, unluck, I don't know. But anyway, I submitted the paper to genetics. Then that was not so much revision, and it was accepted. And that's why it's a single name. And then the term non-synonymous has been published for the first time. Actually, the name was coined with the discussion on Dr. Nei. But according to Naruya Saito's examination, I think this must be the first publication. So I'm honored to be the first one to use non-synonymous substitution. And then we worked on the estimation method for synonymous non-synonymous substitution number. Actually, originally, this was developed by Takashi Miyata's group, but it was so much complicated, so we made a simplification. Then I think Dr. Nei strongly suggested me to distribute the software free of charge. That's very important to let the scientists use those software. So we did intensively. I think his spirit inherited to Suri and Koichiro's mega big hit. And also, I think as an early time of Dr. Nei, I know some of history, particularly around 1980. It was a strong discussion, particularly between Dr. Nei and Dr. Walter Fitch. And we should create the new journal. And at that time, Journal of Molecular Evolution, the journal was there, but they thought it is so important to have another journal. Then naming was so much discussed, like molecular evolution and genetics, or molecular biology and the variation, and a lot of discussion was made between Masatoshi Nei and Walter Fitch. And every time Masatoshi Nei was calling Walter Fitch in front of me, then a lot of discussion. Then I think finally, Dr. Nei decided, let us go with molecular biology and evolution. Then later on, I think in 1985 or 86, and finally this society was created. So finally, I would like to emphasize that after Houston, he moved to Penn State, then to Templeton. I think it was Surya Kumar who really took care of Dr. Nei until the end. I think as a Nei's family, we really like to appreciate Kumar's hospitality. And thank you so much. I think as old guys in this field, we have a responsibility to inherit kind of lessons or histories, legacies from old great people such as Dr. Nei. Thank you so much.
I was lucky to have Nei as my thesis advisor. And after that, I have a long association with him. So today, I would like to say a few words of appreciation. I went to Brown University to study applied mathematics in 1968, before most of you were born. So you see, I'm an archaic human. Okay, and I know a little bit about the development of molecular population genetics and molecular evolution. I originally, in my second year, I met Wendell Fleming, and I thought he was good. And indeed, he was later elected to the National Academy of Sciences. And in particular, he is exceptionally nice. So I asked him to be my advisor. And originally, I want to work on probability theory. But during considering my thesis topic, I thought I should find a branch of science that mathematical theory has not been well developed. And I thought biology is such a subject. So I went to talk to a couple of professors in biology. And when I talked to Nei, I immediately felt that he is very good. And he told me that there are many mathematical problems in genetics, in population genetics. So I talked to Fleming, say if it's all right that I work on population genetics. And he said, sure, that, and he continued to pay my tuition and stipend. Very nice, okay? And so I decided to work on with application to biology. That was one of the best decisions in my life. Okay, and that because Nei is such a good mentor, I was able to finish my thesis in 2 years. And it's a lucky coincidence. I went to Brown in 1968, Nei went to Brown in 1969. I met him in 1970. Then we both left Brown in summer of 1972. Nei was very happy at Brown. So it took a long time for him to decide to move to Houston. And the main decision was because he thought that the new center at Houston is called the Demographic and Population Genetics. We call it the CDPG. Okay. So he moved there in summer of 1972. And then very soon he found that it's in fact a very nice place to do research. So he said, hey, Winshong, this is a very good place. You should come here. And I pay a visit, so I moved to there, okay, in 1973, after 1 year of postdoc fellow, postdoc research with Jim Crow. Okay. In the beginning, I think he also would like me to work with him because at the time he had only one postdoc fellow. And we were a good match because he knew biological issues, and I know and I have mathematical skills. Okay, so we published quite a few papers immediately after I moved to Houston. Okay. Then after that, so I had after that, because he started to have a student like Tajima, Saito, and also postdoc, like Gojobori. So, and I also started to have my own problem. So we later had a few collaboration. Okay, and I would like to say a few words that he really gave me many very good guidance. I had only one biology course in high school. I didn't know anything about biology. And so I had to struggle to understand biology. And he was a living library to me. I often go to see him, like I say, every week we would have he would lunch together, okay? And he would tell me what are the important issues in population genetics and who are the important people to know, okay? So it was very good, quick for me to appreciate what were the important issues in population genetics. And in Houston, Nei has a very good style of talking with colleagues. So he usually brings his lunch, and we have a small meeting room, okay? And everybody bring a lunch there, and we sit together and eat lunch, and he would explain to us what new paper he read and what new manuscript he received or what issues he was discussing with colleagues. You probably don't know that in the 1970s and 1980s, it was a very controversial years, okay, because of the neutralist selectionist conflict, controversy. Okay, so there were two schools, and they actually were quite antagonistic to each other. And actually, because Nei actually wrote quite a few criticism of other people's paper, so it actually took him a long time to get into National Academy of Science. Okay. But anyway, it was a very enjoyable year, and for 17 years I was there. I really enjoyed his guidance. Okay. And he not just pay attention to research, he also, like Takashi just said, he also thought about how to push the field forward. Okay. And as Takashi Nei just said, okay, at the time, the only journal of molecular evolution is a JME, okay? And it was published by Springer. You know, Springer is a very expensive. So not many libraries were able to afford to subscribe JME, okay? And another reason was that JME, the quality was not really very good, okay? So he thought that there was a need to have a new journal, okay? So in 1983, he organized a symposium at Stony Brook, okay? And the title, I think, was the Evolutions of Genes and Proteins. And he actually edited a book with that title. And he invited me to join the symposium and also to join the organization meeting, okay? And during that meeting, it was decided to have a journal, to have a society, and to have a journal, okay? And the participants in that meeting, maybe about 20 persons, were the founding members, okay? And the sole purpose was to have a society to own a journal, okay? And that later, Waterfish suggests to have the title, Molecular Biology and Evolution. And Nei originally thought that's far too broad. But Walter insisted, and then Nei accepted. And it actually turns out to be a good title. And that's why the SMBE, the society name, okay? And Nei also thought which would be a better person to negotiate with a publisher, okay? And when Fitch negotiated with University of Chicago Press, he insisted that the condition is that the society owns the journal, okay? And so that was a very good idea. And so later, so the first issue is from the summer of '83, then the first issue was published at the end of the year. And anyway, with this ownership of the journal, it was able to switch to Oxford, okay? And so, in conclusion, we should all thank Dr. Nei for founding SMBE and MBE. That concludes my talk. Thanks.
I am Naruya Saito from Japan. I already retired last year, so now I am specially appointed professor at National Institute of Genetics. So my title is Remembering Dr. Masatoshi Nei. So I will briefly give you some academic history of myself. In 1982, I entered GSBS, Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at University of Texas, Houston. I was in Japan, and after getting Master of Science degree, I was thinking of going abroad, maybe to US. I got some scholarship. Then I was already very devoted neutralist. So I thought maybe my academic supervisor should be neutralist. Then I thought by looking at many papers, I was sure that Dr. Masatoshi Nei was a neutralist. As Wen-Shan mentioned, clearly he was neutralist. So I asked Dr. Nei, so he said, okay, please come. So I still remember on August 13th, 1982, I came to Houston, and kindly Dr. Takashi Gojobori came to Houston Hobby Airport. Then my life in Houston started. Then in 1986, in September, I received PhD, then returned to Japan and to do my postdoc work. So although our never joining method paper was one of my PhD thesis chapters, the paper itself was published in 1987 when I was already in Japan. Anyway, I was very happy that our never joining method paper has a huge citations. Maybe the most cited paper from Nei School. Probably this year it will exceed 70,000. Then I myself became assistant professor at the Faculty of Science, University of Tokyo in 1990. I was a physical anthropologist. Then in 1992, only that same year, 1990, Dr. Nei's book, Molecular Evolutionary Genetics, published in 1987, was translated into Japanese with Dr. Takashi Gojobori. Then, 2 years later, again, Dr. Takashi Gojobori asked me to come to Mishima, National Institute of Genetics. I was surprised, but anyway, after only 2 years of assistant professor, I became associate professor at the age of 34, pretty young. Although I was there, I was associate professor for 11 years. So anyway, because there was some vacancy, so I became associate professor at the Division of Evolutionary Genetics, National Institute of Genetics. Then, as I told you, 11 years later, again, Dr. Takashi Gojobori made an effort, and he eventually asked Director General of Institute that so I could become professor at the age of 45. Now, after Kimura, Ota, then myself, I was surprised. Now I became professor of the Division of Population Genetics, very prestigious division in the National Institute of Genetics. But anyway, I was very happy. Then, much later, 2013, I published a textbook called Introduction to Evolutionary Genomics from Springer, the notorious Springer. But anyway, I dedicated this book to Dr. Masatoshi Nei. And this book sold pretty well, so I was asked to write a second edition. So in 2018, second edition was published. Again, of course, dedicated to Dr. Masatoshi Nei. Then, at the same year, 2018, our Japonesian Genome Project was started. Japonesia means Japanese island, archipelago. And I was a PI in general, principal investigator of this 5-year project. Then, in a sense, following Dr. Nei, in 2020, we started new journal called iDarwin. Unfortunately, compared to MBE, it is not so successful so far. It's purely online, so no page charge. It's free, no publisher. We are publisher. So maybe that is a problem. But anyway, and as I told you, last year I retired from National Institute of Genetics, and this year Japanese Genome Project was finished. Okay, I still have some time, so I'd like to mention some episode with Dr. Nei. I remember when Fumio Tajima published 83 paper about coalescence theory. It's a single author paper. So at that time, Dr. Nei thought, I guess, his theory was not so important. But actually later, of course, you know, Kingman's coalescence theory became very popular. So maybe Dr. Nei regret that he didn't put his name with Fumio Tajima. Then, in my case, I know Dr. Nei uses his students and postdocs a lot. So after getting PhD, after returning to Japan, I decided not to write a joint paper with Dr. Nei anymore. So I did. And also, Dr. Nei often asked me to come to Houston or later Penn State. I always declined. I'm sorry, I'm busy. So anyway, but last year, he invited me. Then I went to Pennsylvania, his retirement house. Then he gave me all his books, both written in Japanese and English. So I donated these books to Museum of National Institute of Genetics. So his old books are now in National Institute of Genetics, Mishima. So some pictures here, Dr. Nei, and next to him is Koichiro Tamura, and the white hair guy in the rightmost is Dr. Yoshio Tateno, and with a tie, it's a Nobel laureate. I forgot his name. This was when Dr. Nei got the Kyoto Prize. Then this was, I think, to celebrate Dr. Jack Shao. There's a dinner in Houston, so Dr. Nei, Takashi Kojobori, and his wife, and I forgot his name. Yeah, anyway. Blair Hedges. Okay, Blair Hedges. Sorry, Blair. And this is Dr. Nei and his wife last year. And I was very happy that my textbook, was on his desk. And this is Dr. Nei last year. And this is last slide. So Dr. Nei's family. So I met Keiichiro and also Sayaka. Okay. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a video tribute from Aravinda, one of his earlier students.
And good afternoon. My name is Aravinda Chakravarti, and I wish to add my recollections of Dr. Masatoshi Nei after his recent demise. I was a student with Dr. Nei between 1974 and 1979. I presume I was either his fourth or fifth graduate student. And I'm going to tell you a little story of how I got there, because I came as a student to Houston to really train to be a human geneticist. And I was interested in population genetics, but it was not a subject that I knew in its modern incarnation at that time. So when I came in, we, as graduate students, had to do rotations, and his was the first rotation that I did. It was a small office. This is when the center was the Center for Demographic and Population Genetics, as it was called. It was located in the Prudential Insurance Building. I presume we were on the 11th floor. And in those suite and offices, I was given an office, and I sat across his office, which I think, as all of you can imagine, meant he kept a very close eye on what I did. And he was then fascinated by this contention, really, based on a paper by Dick Lewontin and Jesse Krakauer, that tests of selection, of natural selection, could be designed simply by looking at the distribution on FST, and some kind of a scaled parameter from that distribution has to exceed some number, And he was very suspicious, correctly, I think, in thinking of the circumstances that would lead to a large amount of variation even under drift. So the first set of studies that I did with him had to do with figuring out the sampling distribution, both in isolated as well as in populations undergoing migration. And I just graduated with an undergraduate in statistics from the Indian Statistical Institute. And as a technical problem, it was laborious and tedious. I didn't think it was that difficult, and he sort of trusted me to figure this out correctly, which I did. A fellow student and then roommate of mine was Yoshio Tateno, and in some sense I was also under Yoshio's tutelage. So that was successful, and then I continued after that rotation in working out far more elaborate cases using computer simulations, which were new to me after my undergraduate. And this ultimately was successful. His suspicions were correct. The Lewontin-Krakauer test didn't really work as the authors had envisioned. And this led to a number of papers. 2 papers in theoretical population biology, which was really a great journal. In those days, it probably still is, but it's not something that I study actively, and that was my introduction to Dr. Nei. But as I told you, I wanted to do human genetics, and this is not what he was doing. So I had to convince him that this other problem was also worth doing, and he became interested how this could be extended to the study on many questions of human genetics. This was at a point in time where linkage data had just come in. I think Khan and Doji's paper on the first RFLP had just also been produced, and we could begin to do this data to predict a disease, both in this case in families and in individuals. So that's what I worked on, which was much more closer to my heart. But the first paper in this series was written by Dr. Nei, and I think published in 1979. This was at a meeting or maybe a little bit earlier meeting of the International Statistical Society in New Delhi, in which I was also a participant. Even though I was a student, he asked me to speak at a session that he chaired. And this was eventually my doctoral dissertation, and I published papers. After I graduated with him, he was always quite dissatisfied that I didn't do it very promptly, which it's true, I didn't. And they appeared in 1982 and 1983. As you can imagine, Working with Dr. Nei was tough. He was much younger then. But I have to say, I was so impressed with his knowledge of biology, which was almost equal to his quantitative skills and his intuition for using the right kind of quantitative skills for the problem at hand. I was around many remarkable people, Wensheng Li, Ranajit Chakraborty, and others. Many other students. Takashi Gojibori came as a postdoctoral fellow. I think Fumio Tajima, I mentioned Yoshio Tateno, and others. We had so many remarkable visitors. Takeo Mariyama was one, and Tomoko Ota was one. And it was really a grand time in my life, the remnants of which education has worked well for me even till today. So I owe quite a bit of my success to the rigor that he instilled in me. And I hope all of you who are out there and celebrating his life would just assume that I'm there with you as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we have another video tribute from Chengyi Wu.
Okay.
I met Dr. Nei in 1981 when I was a graduate student at the University of British Columbia, working with Andy Beckenbach and Conrad Werhan. And we are the only three evolution geneticists at that time. Most other people work on ecology. So when I heard that Dr. Nei and Wensheng will come for a meeting, I was quite excited. And upon their arrival, I went to reception and met Nei for the first time, and he was discussing with a bunch of senior people about whether it's time to do molecular evolution study based on DNA data. Remember at that time, sequencing was still quite expensive, so most people rely on restriction fragment length polymorphism. The general feeling is that with one base pair change every 10 kb or so, the data density is just not enough. But Nei at that time made a very cogent argument among that group of senior scientists that if the rule is sufficient in general, even a small amount of data with the rather straightforward analysis, one can see the pattern. And later on, I realized that this is a sort of the general trait of Dr. Nei's science, that it's old-fashioned that science is about simplicity. And many of his work are characterized by that. So his genetic distance method on allozyme data is one example. During that period, there are many much more sophisticated methods, but his method was the most direct and intuitively appealing and most powerful as well. So this is really in sharp contrast with the large data complex analysis nowadays. I want to say one more thing about Dr. Nei being a mentor. That time I was waiting for UBC to approve my request to transfer to a PhD program. And after talking to Dr. Nei, I feel that it probably would do me better if I just do a PhD study with him. So I asked him, and he accepted, even though he hardly knew me at that time. But I think he just felt that I was sufficiently enthusiastic, and that is good enough to do science. So, but a month later, UBC has started a new PhD program in genetics, and they approved my transfer. So if I stayed 10 more months, I would be able to get a PhD degree instead of the master. So I did that. And then I call him up. I say that this is what I'm doing, but I still very much want to work with him. So if I have to do my second PhD with him, I would be happy to do it. And he just said, no, you have already had your PhD, you should come here as a postdoc. Remember, it's much more expensive to pay to support a postdoc than a PhD student. And he would get the same thing from me anyway, but he still decided to support me. And later on, I realized that he didn't have enough funding and had in fact asked Wensheng to cover my first year. So I'm really quite grateful that he would go a long way to support a young person who he actually didn't know very much, except that the guy is enthusiastic. So when I joined, Takashi Gojobori was there, Fumio Tajima, Dan Grauer, Partha Majumdar, and later on joined by Seiya Saito. And it was really quite an exciting time, and we all centered around Dr. Nei and Wensheng. And I think that was quite a wonderful experience, and I think people of my generation who's around Nei are pretty lucky in that sense. And I'm really grateful to him and to Wensheng during those formative years. Thanks.
So I think we are starting to get a sense of his family system, to take money from one student to pay the other one. So we'll ask Claudia to come and chat. It's okay. Sorry. It's far away.
Oh,
It's okay.
why? My slide
It's disappeared now.
disappeared. Oh, disappeared. It's okay.
Sorry. Well, I arrived at Penn State in '91 the first time, and Brazil back then was kind of the area of phylogenetics was only taking people, from the zoology departments. So I first got to Penn State and I told Dr. Nei, well, Dr. Nei, I like phylogenetics, but I like parsimony. And then, and then he looked at me with his poker face and said, you should take my course. And I started working with Drosophila, and we worked for a year in this paper. And by the time that it was ready to be submitted, we were about to submit to SMBE. Another paper, basically the same thing that we were working on, got published in Drosophila, and he said, okay, we'll have to do time now. So, for another 6 months, we worked in Drosophila, and we published the first big time tree for Drosophilid species. That's my paper that has, the largest number of citations. I'm very proud of it. And well, throughout the years, in my PhD, I also did this work which used known phylogeny of vertebrates to evaluate efficiency of markers, mitochondrial markers, and molecular methods, phylogenetic reconstruction methods in recovering that known phylogeny. So in that paper, we actually concluded that selecting markers was far more important than selecting methods, and kind of put that quarrel, that fight that was taking place in Brazil a little bit to rest, but not so much. Throughout the years and the decades, I had 3 kids and a lot of work. I couldn't visit Dr. Nei much, but I'm glad others have, like Naoko and Sudhir, and many of his alumni have have organized, his celebrations throughout the years. So I remember one time I had just gave birth to my second kid, and Leonardo, and he was like about 2 weeks old. And there was this celebration in Japan, and I said, I have to go. And I did go, and when I got there, I realized I just had to go. I just had to come. Dr. Nei taught me a lot, not only on molecular evolution, but also in life. And I think that if I can pass a little bit of this knowledge on to my kids and my students and alumni, I'll be a very happy person. Thank you.
Oh, it happens to be me. I've forgotten. Okay, so I will make my few moments of discussion about Dr. Nei and how I found him. For this may be instructive to many of the students who are now so used to Google and all the other electronic tools. In 1990, I did my my master's thesis in computer simulation and population genetics. I did not do any research really. I just learned how to program a little thing in a microprocessor system. And at that time, I was looking for someone to work with who did similar things, obviously. But how do you find anybody when you have no Google or internet? So we used to have this thing, which was Peterson's guide. This thicker guide, and those of you who've been here know that you go through every page one by one, and you look at every professor's description one line. And I was looking for the word computer simulation, and Dr. Nei appeared. I said, oh, this person uses the words computer simulation in their description, I will work with them. So I wrote to him, and that's how I found him, by the pair computer simulation. For those of you who may not realize, computer simulations were the original generative models in machine learning. Here, the training data are basically trees and substitution models, and you can generate a large number of alignments that are similar to each other, which is what we do now in GANs and other things. So this has been going on in molecular evolution in many fields for a long time. But anyway, I arrived in State College, Pennsylvania on December 20th, arrived in his office. He hands me his book and autographs it and says, read it. Okay. So in retrospect, I feel like it was a Christmas gift, because as you can see, I used it too much. Although I must confess, every time I read it, I went to sleep. I mean, it's a monograph, it's not Harry Potter. So, but it was incredible. And so people ask me, how did you start developing Mega? What was the reason? And the reason was, in my bachelor's degree in engineering, which I did alongside my master's degree, I did a lot of software development, including user interface for a mail server in a big company. As a part of technical exercise, I did computer simulation. And so I liked programming, I liked all of these things, and Dr. Nei liked software development and distribution. But he had a lot of micro programs, one for neighbor joining, one for DNDS. And I said, oh, I can learn coding. So I began coding, and soon I built a little software, and I showed it to him, and I said, oh, look what I built. He said, oh, that's cool. Why don't you write this as a regular program? So that's how the Mega stuff started. When later on we discussed with other members of the lab if they want to participate, and many people already had cool software packages like Vostorg. I remember that Andre already had. And so essentially, the Mega was created in 1991. I developed a user interface. On the bottom left, you see that interface is basically character-based. There's no graphics there. And the new technology was coming out at that time that you could do this. Before that, it was kind of command line. And essentially, 1992, we developed Mega, first version, test version to be distributed to Nei's classroom. And some of you here might have taken the Nei's class that year, the number of Penn State students here from that time. You may have seen it. So, within a year and a half of being at Penn State, we had something that I had no idea how useful it was. I was just doing programming to learn methods, because unless you do your own programming, you don't realize what methods are really doing, even though we may understand superficially how they're working. So that's what I did. And so these are the in a sense, Fab 4 who worked on this. Koichiro Tamura, who developed the actual really pretty tree explorer early on in Mega. I did many other things. And then Dr. Nei, of course, was always the one who told me, don't do this, don't do that. Mostly don't do something. And do something which is published by the lab, which is great with me because I loved neighbor joining method and the DNDS that Nei Gojobori developed. And what you see here is a diskette. We had a production house. We used to make copies of a booklet for 140 pages, copies of the diskette, and mail it. So Joyce White mailed 2,500 copies of Mega. And of course, I was a graduate student, mostly oblivious, just happily drinking and doing stuff. But now I realize in retrospect, it was really a cool thing we ended up doing. And then I stayed on with Dr. Nei as a postdoc because we began writing a book together, and it was really a tremendous honor for me to assist him in the book writing process. Also at the same time, Windows had come around, so I began programming for Windows, and Koichiro Tamura's help, we were able to actually develop a completely Windows graphical version, which became very popular later on. Another thing I will say is Nei was a very generous mentor for me. By the time I joined his group, he was already 60 years old, and therefore he's really mellowed out. Unlike Takashi's time, he was still, I think, not so mellow. By the time we arrived in Penn State, he was mellowed out completely. So I developed a new algorithm. He said, just write by yourself, don't bother me. I did another weird project that actually I remember correctly, Michael Lynch handled for genetics, if I remember correctly. He said, just do it. I don't have time for this. And those ended up being all right papers. But then he allowed us to work within the lab with each other and publish papers. We send it to him. He will provide some feedback, but didn't want to become an author, mostly because he didn't have time. He was working on many other things, but he was encouraging us nevertheless. But most impressively, he allowed me, maybe because he was very happy with Mega, everybody would call him and say, Dr. Nei, you did a great job programming Mega. And I taught him how to click mouse. He was like, this is too fast. No, this is too slow. I said, just be patient, Dr. Nei, you can click it. He was, whatever the reason was, he was really generous with me. And with Blair Hedges at Penn State, we wrote a bunch of papers outside of my thesis, outside of anything, just because they were interesting. And a bunch of papers in developmental evolution with Ji-Chun Lai's group at Penn State, just because I could. So he was, from my perspective, an extremely generous mentor. Because of him, I have so many cool projects today that I'm still carrying on from the time from his lab. And I want to thank him for basically being a part of my life more than actually my biological family now, since I've been with him for 30 plus years. So thank you for listening to my diatribe, and to Nei for helping me get where I am today. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Koichiro Tamura, and I was at Tokyo Metropolitan University now, and when I was in the Dr. Nei's lab, that was 1991 to 1993. This is a picture a few years later, 1994. There is Andre there, and Dr. Nei, and me, and Sudhir. It's not So, time to laugh. And actually, Dr. Nei's age is just my age now. And at that time, Dr. Nei at Penn State in 1991, at that time was right after the publishing of Hughes and Nei, 1988 in Nature. I think everybody knows it is a kind of epoch-making paper, and after that, everybody do the DNDS test for finding a positive selection gene, right? And of course, at that time, I came to the Dr. Nei's lab, so he wanted me to do something about MHC, but already the most important part was done. So, sorry. So I didn't want to eat anything left over by somebody else. So I was actually running away from the MHC things. And the best of things is Dr. Nei allowed me to do whatever I like. So Dr. Nei, I didn't like do something about MHC because Austin already did it. Nothing interesting anymore. But he was okay. So you can do it whatever you like. That is, I think, best of his mentorship for me, at least. Then, fortunately, after several months, this paper came out. That was Markston King's group, actually. Okay, I thought it was Markston King was last, but now I see Alan C. Wilson was last. And in this paper, I think this is a first large set of sequence data. They sequenced 135 D-loop regions from humans. And of course, after this paper, so-called mitochondrial leap was, everybody talking about that. And this is a phylogeny they published. And the point was ancestor. Our common ancestor is among the African. So it to the African origin hypothesis. And we thought it is very hard to make this kind of phylogeny at that time. Now, maybe using MEGA, it may be not so difficult, but at that time, it is extremely difficult to compute and make this kind of phylogeny. So, as already Sudhir said, we could make some additional research with Blair Hedges and Sudhir and me and Markston King. And it is very important that the Dr. Nei let us do whatever we like. So the point is there is no Dr. Nei's name, but our name, Sudhir and me are included. So we could collaborate with a non-Dr. Nei group freely. He was a student, I was just postdoc of Dr. Nei. Still, he allowed us to do that. And this is a nice figure of the neighbor joining tree, in addition to the parsimony tree they made. Okay. However, I thought it was hard to make a root on such a big phylogeny anyway. So I focus on the correction formula to measure the time of divergence of human mitochondrial DNA. And we developed a TN93 model, and I derived this kind of complicated equation, which works very well. And this is the result. And between human and chimpanzee, average is 0.75. And within humans, that was 0.024, 30 times difference. So if we use this distance to the root, And assuming chimp and human divergence is 6 million years ago, we can say the human most common ancestor's time age is 200K. So which is supporting to the African origin hypothesis at that time. However, Dr. Nei's opinion about TN93 model was terrible, and he said it is too complicated, and I don't like complication, and I like simple models. So at that time, I was writing paper. He said, actually, you don't have to include my name. It is so terrible, but I have no idea about human evolution, and he was a specialist. So Dr. Nei, please collaborate with me and write a discussion about human evolution. And finally, he accepted. However, so after many, many years, the Google scholar said that paper is highly cited, 12,000. And then after that, he said, I like highly cited papers. So I'm sure now he's very happy with TN93 model. And anyway, this is I was in Penn State only 2 years, and it was the very happiest time for me research with Dr. Nei, and also from that time we started collaboration with Sudia for over 30 years probably, and I really appreciate Dr. Nei, and it is my proud of him working with me. Thank you so much.
Okay, now.
Hi, I'm Naoko Takesaki, and I was a student of Dr. Nei in Penn State from 1991 to 1996. You know, the building where our office was, and Dr. Nei's office was on the 3rd floor of this building. And title of my thesis was phylogenetic inference from molecular data. So at that time, I studied inconsistency of Maximus parsimony method and phylogenetic test of molecular clock, and so also genetic distance and constructing population trees using allele frequency data. At that time, microsatellite data became popular, and but Dr. Nei's distance measure, standard genetic distance, and DA distance, these were developed for blood group data or electrophoretic data. In 1972 or 1983, they worked well for even microsatellite DNA data. So they are still used to this day. So I think Dr. Nei had such insight. He was good at finding kind of important problems with kind of generality. So many of his work are long-standing. Now, when I was a student, only a few genes were available for making phylogeny, but now so many loci or genes are available. literally like more than 1,000 genes we can use for making phylogeny. So my work became like phylogenetic inference from genomic data. And recently I studied the paleognath phylogeny, the ostrich and mostly flightless birds. For this group of birds, not only a large number of loci, but also different types of sequenced data available, like CNE, intron, or UCE. These are non-coding sequences, and also coding sequence available. So actually, these different types of sequence data affected the tree topology estimated. You see these different trees made for different types of sequence data. And so if you have introns and CDS which have high sequence divergence and high GC content, it seems like tree topology were biased. So these data have deviation from time homogeneous model we usually use for making phylogeny, like GTR or such thing. Also, using so many loci, we can kind of resolve the extent of lineage sorting. And these three different tree topologies. Tree 1 is 40%, tree 2 is 30%, and tree 3 is 30%. That, my estimate. And this, means, actually species 3 is tree 1, most frequent one. And amazing thing about Dr. Nei is already a long time ago, he studied this problem of gene trees and species tree in 1988. So we can use his result about this estimation of species tree too. Yeah, this. Thank you.
Okay, Andre.
Don't try to spell my last name, it's dangerous. Anyway, I'm not cruel and unusual, so I won't be giving you many technical details of my life story, but a few lessons from working with Dr. Masatoshi Nei. When I came to his lab, I basically was incapable of writing papers. English alone. Philosophy was, if I spent a year working on this paper, you should spend a year reading it and understanding, right? I'm not sure if you read first paper by R.A. Fisher, 1918. Long paper filled with algebraic equations, and he doesn't tell you why. So page after page after page. It's a groundbreaking paper. It's very important, but it's poorly written, and his later papers are actually much better written. So first lesson is Dr. Masatoshi Nei told me that technical details are important, but shouldn't be first. First, you have to find important problem, and if in imperfect solution for important problem is better than fantastic solution for completely unimportant problem. Second, you have to write your result and kind of present it to listener, to reader. It's not reader's job to rediscover everything, and in this overwhelming world, when we have literally kind of millions of publications, it's our duty to write clear and simple paper. So not trying to make simple things complicated, but other way around. Okay, and when I wrote my first paper, Dr. Nei said, it is as if he tasted some food and he wasn't sure that it's quite fresh. He said, you should submit it to Journal of Theoretical Biology. I never read it. So I never published this paper. Then we were working on another paper, and I just want to give you a feeling of Masatoshi Nei at this time. Saturday, I woke up, I'm drinking coffee, telephone call. This is Masatoshi Nei. I'm working on your paper. Could you please come to lab right now? And I came, and it was fantastic. He wrote papers by longhand, and then I think Joyce, his assistant, typed them on computer. Okay. Tatsuya, Claudia, we can't recognize you in mask, right? But you're basically the same. And you know these people, right? Naoka Takizaki on the left and Sudhi Kumar on the right. Yeah, and I'm sorry if you already seen this photograph. We're unrecognizable, except actually Koichiro, yeah. You're pretty much recognizable. Okay, and yeah, I couldn't avoid. It's one of those meetings in Japan. We had several of those, and it was fantastic, actually, on many, many levels. So I think somebody already mentioned that we had those lunch meetings, right, in the Penn State, and previously they had it in Texas, when during lunch people took their food, and we would sit around table and discuss. And right now, I realize it's probably the most important training that I got in life because, well, you never know when you get fortunate. Subset of you probably met Masatoshi Nei, but his kind of interface for outside world and for family was completely different. He could be vicious, aggressive, competitive, right? As a result, of course, as mentioned, it delayed his election to the National Academy of Sciences. But for the family, he was, I mean, academic family in this case, he was extremely generous. He spent a lot of time, he advised, and he cared. It's a rare thing, you know. Recently, I got interested in psychiatric genetics and in psychiatry in general, and I realized large percent of population is actually sociopath or psychopaths, right? And you're bound to hit one of them, right, in your life. And it's pure luck. So Dr. Nei wasn't one of them, for sure. But I'm saying this because hitting wrong person, because when you're traveling overseas, you don't know where you're going, right? By the way, the person who met me in JFK in New York was Dr. Nei's son. So Keitaro, he followed us from one plane to another plane because my wife's English was non-existent and my was sketchy. Okay. And that's how I want you to remember him, right? As a person, young, smiling, right? Generous and giving. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
evening. I am Helen Piankiewska, and I was a student of Dr. Nei's from 1999 to 2003. I graduated. I'm probably going to repeat a lot of the same messages, but I felt at the time, and I still do, how extremely generous as a mentor Dr. Nei was. When I came to join his lab, I knew nothing about molecular evolution. Maybe I should not admit this out in public. I was interested in population genetics, and so when he invited me to join his lab, it was a very different world of questions. And so I got to experience a lot of, and at the time, if some of you remember, there were a lot of new genomes coming out, some technologies developing, and so the data started pouring in, and these were good years, one of the best years, I think, sort of to be in that space and to start asking questions. And so I got to work on many different gene families, and so these are just some histone genes. I actually got to work, Koshiro, I got to work on MHC genes. So he finally found one of the sort of our people to do that, and so we also worked on histone genes. One of the things that still resonates with me to this day and probably informs a lot of my work is he was telling me pretty much every couple of weeks repeatedly, Helen, you should work, you should read about immune system, you should work on immune system genes. And at the time, I don't know, maybe it's the age, grad students, I was not feeling like immune genes up until, again, we got into the MHC questions, and so we actually dated some of the alleles, and it got me thinking again about the evolution of the host and pathogen interactions. So it was kind of forced. And then after I graduated, I realized how correct Dr. Nei was, and that everybody should work on immune system genes, which we kind of do. So this was one of the recent reviews that we published, and so I sent him a copy, and he was very happy sort of to get that. So it's kind of coming full circle for me. Of the other sort of interesting Nei stories, I'm going to repeat that what others have said. He allowed his grad students to work on questions that were interesting to them, and I was able to collaborate with Austin Hughes outside of Nei's lab as a grad student. He also encouraged independence, so I got to submit some of my own papers and sort of handle that. It was an amazing experience, and well, obviously 50 revisions of some, I did not write well at the time, I admit. 50 revisions, and you get the first one, which was basically he would take a look, he would not give comments, he would just say, go away, come back in 2 weeks with a new version. And that was your cue that you really need to rethink how you write everything. By the time you get your draft full of long handwritten comments, you knew that you were onto something, and this was a workable draft, which made everybody very, very happy. So I was very fortunate to be able to work with Dr. Nei, and thank you all for sharing these experiences with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Masafumi Nozawa from Tokyo Metropolitan University, Japan. So I was a postdoc of Dr. Nei from 2006 to 2011 for 5 years. So today I'd like to talk about my memory of Dr. Nei, particularly focusing on the daily discussion with him. So I still remember that when I joined his lab for the first time then, so his first words is like this. So publishing 2 first author papers each year is a standard in my lab. So I was so upset at that time because I just graduated from Japan, and I don't have any confidence to publish 2 papers in a year. So I was really upset. But anyway, I started as a postdoc of Dr. Nei. So at that time, so he came to the lab only in the afternoon after having lunch at his house. In the morning, he was concentrating on writing his book, I think. And in the mornings, in the afternoon, he came to me always around 2 p.m. every day. And he always said, "Did you get any interesting results?" So, yeah, I'd like to say, of course, yes, all the time, but actually it was impossible, so I'm almost always saying, no, I'm sorry. So this is a kind of daily discussion. So it was sometimes very tough, but it trained me a lot. And in the morning, even in the morning, so he was in his house, but still, so he often called me over the phone. So at that time, so I forgot to say, we were working on the evolution of olfactory receptor genes and microRNA genes to understand the birth and death evolution, particularly focusing on the multi-gene families. And so particularly for the writing, when we were writing the papers, he often called me over the phone. For example, at 9 a.m., so you should conduct this analysis. So I say, yes, Dr. Nei. Then, just 30 minutes later, at 9:30, so he said, he called me again, and what were the results? But, so for me, actually, I haven't even started yet because I have to learn how to analyze. But so I have to say, so no, not yet. I'm sorry. So this is a kind of daily discussion. But from these experiences, so I seriously learned. So how can I say? He's always thinking about research. So yeah, I really respect his attitude to the science. And another impressive situation is writing a paper with him. So this is his handwriting. So originally he tried to revise my manuscript, and try to keep my words as much as possible, but eventually he gave up, and he rewrote, in this case, the entire paragraph. But, and actually, so as you can see here, that reading his writing is very tough. But actually, by interpreting his words is really so important. And I need to retype everything. But during this process, I think that my writing skill is drastically improved, I think. Yeah, so I really appreciate his supervision. And eventually, luckily, I was able to write 13 papers with Dr. Nei. Yeah. And sorry, I don't very much introduce my own research, but so I really appreciate his supervision. Without his supervision, I don't think I can survive in this field. So I still sometimes hear his voice. So did you get any interesting results? So with these words, I'd like to pursue my research. Thank you very much.
That's really funny. It almost feels like I have a bunch of my students in the audience, and they must be seeing how I was trained by Dr. Nei, because I have a similar problem, calling and saying, "Did you get something?" But I only call them during the time when they're supposed to be at work, because we have now a work-life balance situation. But yes, I mean, we all got trained for many years. So Sayaka Miura was the last graduate student of Dr. Nei, and she sent in a video. So let's listen to that before we hear from Dr. Nei's daughter, Marumi, a short thing, and then we will conclude right after that.
I was a PhD student of Dr. Nei from 2007 to 2012. Currently, I am research faculty at Temple University. When I was a student of Dr. Nei, I had various different projects. We analyzed nucleotide variation in human populations to test Dr. Nei's hypothesis on the impact of random fluctuation of selection coefficients. Also, we analyzed microRNA genes and their target sites to study about their evolutionary history. Through these projects, I learned principles in molecular evolution and phylogenetics. Now, I am a research faculty at Temple University, and my research interest is molecular evolution and phylogenetics at the cellular scale. I am studying somatic mutations which accumulate over lifetime. Also, I study evolution of cancer cells which accumulate lots of somatic mutations and move around different metastatic tumor sites. Also, I am interested in omics data analysis, including RNA-seq data, where we can analyze evolutionary pattern of gene expressions. So, over last few years, we developed various computational methods to analyze molecular evolution in cancer. Also, using our newly developed methods, we analyze the empirical data to derive insight to evolutionary patterns of somatic cells. These are examples of phylogenetic methods we recently developed. For example, Clone Finder is a method to infer phylogeny of cancer cell populations from tumor sequencing data. Also, we developed methods for downstream analysis of inferred clone phylogenies. For example, MOCA is designed to study genotype-phenotype evolution using single-cell RNA-seq data. Using these our methods, we analyzed various empirical data sets to ask biological questions. For example, we asked if gene expression changes follow the evolution of tumor cells. Also, I am interested in the evolution of pathogens. At Temple University, my office was next to Dr. Nei's office, and this is a photo from Dr. Nei's office. Also, this is a photo from his house last year. Thank you.
So we really appreciate you holding on just a short while longer before you all hit the bars. Clearly, the weather is very nice outside in the nighttime in particular. So Maromi Nei is a daughter of Dr. Nei, who is a professor in neurology at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia. And she's the one who played piano in the background music, and her children are the ones who played cello and violin. And so Maromi is going to send us a 2-minute video to express her thanks to the society and people here. So let's see what she has to say.
And thanks to all of the participants. We as the family really appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. We know how much he cherished his relationships with his colleagues, and we know that he strongly felt that collaboration and mentorship were amongst the most important contributions that anyone could provide in the field of science. As a family, we have enjoyed learning about his work, at least in the capacity that we were able to understand. And we've met many of you or heard him speak highly of so many of you over the years. So we feel truly honored that you've gathered here to reflect on his work and your relationships with him today. We remember his personal life and the ways in which he meant so much to us over the years. He had certainly been a great role model and mentor for me. In childhood, I would often go to his desk while he was working and ask questions, or would just sit on the floor doodling on backs of old manuscript drafts. We would talk about various topics or just keep each other company, and he never asked me to leave or said that I was bothering him, no matter what he was concentrating on. He supported both my brother and my interests. For example, he knew how much I enjoyed playing the piano, and in high school, I recall overhearing him tell my piano teacher that I would like to make her a scientist in response to her suggestion of a career in music. And though he felt that way, he still took me to my piano lessons every week, knowing how much it meant to me. When my brother decided to become an architect and I decided to pursue medicine, he fully supported us in our career paths. My father grew up during World War II and in post-war Japan, and we heard many stories of his childhood growing up on a farm during those days. He endured great difficulties during that time, but he also enjoyed a very active, independent, and adventurous childhood exploring the natural world. And this love of nature remained strong throughout his life. We often took walks as a family, and he would never fail to be in awe of seeing an impressive landscape or a very large tree, typically measuring its trunk size by how many arm lengths could span around it. While he enjoyed the beauty of nature, this often sparked scientific inquiry about how the natural world was created. Lastly, I would just like to mention that the person who's been the most important in his life and who supported him without reservation has always been my mother. I know that his loss is tremendous to her, as they were always a strong team together. She is grateful for all the support that you have provided, condolences sent, and photos and memories shared. We as a family are truly grateful to be able to share in this event with you. Thank you.
Close to the end of the session, and I want to begin by thanking you all for being here this late in the evening to attend after the whole day of wonderful sessions at this conference, this event, and to share with the Nei's academic family, and many of you are actually this family's descendant and or research cousins, let's call them, and it's really wonderful to serve this society, to do research in this area. The amount of collaboration and camaraderie that you see among people is incredible. And I find that this is a really extremely healthy and wealthy society that has done really well for the students, young investigators as well as senior investigators. So, and I remember being at Penn State as a graduate student in 1992 when Dr. Nei organized a conference in which they established SMBE as an official regular society with presidents and all those things. And of course, I was not clued into what was really happening, but in retrospect, it was really a tremendously fortunate event. And through Dr. Nei, I met all the individuals here, which have been a bedrock in my life, and many of you coming to SMBE. So thank you so much for being here. And I will see if Takashi wants to say something. No, he thinks he said everything. So thank you so much. And please get in touch with all my colleagues here and talk about Nei in any way you like and have any questions. Thank you so much.